Welcome, loyal lads and ladies. My name is Midnight Wolf, and welcome to a new show that I am kind of starting called the Wolf on the Field Show. It is a college football sort of discussionary type stream show. I don't know, there's a bunch of descriptions that you can probably throw in there with that. But in this episode, we are going to be going over my favorite team in college football. That is the Oklahoma Sooners. I will be previewing their schedule. I'm kind of going through some games that I think that they should do well in, games that they should probably struggle in this year, and out what where I think the Oklahoma Sooners could be at this year. And this is the whole point of this, is just to kind of spark conversation back, and so I figured I would go ahead and give him a shout out for providing this footage, so that people like myself can take advantage of it. But thank you, Matthew Loves Ball, if you ever watch this. But yeah, really without further ado, let's go ahead and just get started with it. I mean, I don't want to keep you guys too long here. So let's go ahead and just bring up the actual season and kind of just dissect it a little bit. We'll kind of go over some of the information of each team from the last season and kind of what I think the season could look like for Oklahoma. And then later on, I kind of want to highlight a couple of games that are not necessarily played by Oklahoma against these opponents, but there are some games that Oklahoma plays, or some opponents that we play that play other teams that are notable teams to go up against, and depending on the outcome of those games could determine the quote-unquote strength of schedule of Oklahoma. I know a lot of the college football playoff committee loves to utilize that kind of information to determine where they rank people, is what does your schedule look like. So there are certain games that could bolster Oklahoma depending on how well they do against their opponent, and then of course how Oklahoma does against against that opponent. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with Arkansas State. That is the season opener. That is 1 week and 1 day from today. I am super excited about it. It's going to be exciting. First game is always exciting just because it's the first game in forever, it feels like. So there's always a natural hype that surrounds it, regardless of who Oklahoma plays. It's always going to be fun. It's always going to be exciting to see kind of where we're at, even though it may not be the greatest sign or the greatest showing of the team. It's still really fun and exciting. So I'm going to kind of go over Arkansas State here, and I don't really know a whole lot about them. I know that historically speaking, Oklahoma does like to schedule some teams in their non-conference schedules that are kind of warm-up games. And I hate to say that about any team, because I am under the idea that any team can beat any team on any day, if everything works out in their favor. So it's kind of one of those things that until we see it on the field, anybody can beat Oklahoma, but Oklahoma could beat anybody. I mean, that's where we're at right now. We have zero ball to go off of, so it's anybody's game at this point. So, but let's go over kind of Arkansas State. Oh, wrong one. I'm getting ahead of myself. Arkansas State. Let's go over kind of their last season and how they did. And real quick, before I get too far into this, I know every season is different. I know there are other factors at play, like recruiting and transfer portals and all of that stuff. That being said, when we're talking about preseason conversations and preseason expectations and that sort of thing, the only information we have on a team is from their spring game as well as their previous season. Like, that's all we have to go off of, really. We have no idea how these teams are going to be. So that's why I'm going to kind of look back a little bit to then hopefully help have a clearer future of what we might see this season. So with that being said, Arkansas State, I mean, they definitely had a lot of losses last year, but there were some games that they were actually reasonably close that could have gone in their favor. And so, you know, all that to say, like, they're not a terrible team. They definitely could have been worse. I mean, and 12 points against Ohio State, that's not bad. When you really look at the grand scheme of things. So I think that they could be a pretty decent team, and I think that especially with it being an Oklahoma first season opener game, I could totally see there being some rust on Oklahoma side, and especially after the last season. I mean, we certainly weren't that good last year, so it's not like we have like a lot of rust. But I don't know. I kind of, for lack of better terms, I think that we have a really good chance of shutting Arkansas State out, but I don't think we will. I think there will be enough rust there that it will actually turn out to be a decent team, decent outcome. So my prediction is 48-13. I think that's a pretty fair assessment going into the season. I think that with any team that starts off with a season might have some rust, might have some things that they need to work on, and that's no disrespect to Arkansas State. I just historically, Arkansas State's not been the greatest, and I think that as a prediction, as an expectation, as something that we can take from the previous season, I think it'll be a blowout. But I think that Arkansas State does get 13 points, and whether that's 13 points early in the game or during trash time, that is yet to be determined, of course. But I think that 48-13 is a pretty fair prediction going into the new season. Let's move on to SMU. So let me click that real quick. SMU, I don't really know a whole lot about them either. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself again. I keep clicking the wrong buttons. SMU, there's the button I needed. And that should be hidden for some reason. It's not. There we go. SMU, I don't know a whole lot about them as well as Arkansas State, but from their record of last year, they actually look pretty decent, pretty stout. So as a second game of the season, non-conference, we might want to like be on guard against this team. Like, this could, like, if we're gonna have a non-conference upset, it would probably be this game. They have some pretty decent wins against various different teams, including the next team that Oklahoma plays, and their losses are actually pretty decent losses. I mean, look at TCU. Like, TCU was like a great team last year in Big 12, and they very well could have beat TCU that game. They definitely got handed to by UCF. And then you look at Cincinnati, another Big 12 team going into this season. They very well could have beaten them, and Cincinnati is not a bad team. And BYU even, like in the New Mexico Bowl, there's a 1-point difference. So I think SMU could give Oklahoma problems. I think that Oklahoma does shave off some of the rust from the first game. I think that it could very easily be a close game, but I don't think it will. I think it will be another blowout. I think SMU will score early. I think that they will, if they don't get a touchdown, I think that they will at least get a field goal their first drive. There's two ways that that could happen. I think that SMU will get a touchdown their first drive and go for 2 to get an early start in the game. Or they will kick a field goal, and then maybe somewhere in the second quarter or even third quarter, they will kick another field goal. That's kind of where I see SMU at. And I think Oklahoma will do just a really good job at containing them and putting out a decent score. But I think SMU's defense might give Oklahoma's offense a little bit of problems. Just like, stuff that will definitely need to be addressed for future conference games. But I think that overall it'll be a pretty good score of 34-6. Now we get to the school from the city that I was born in. Let's go ahead and I've got to do it this way because of how I have it set up. I should have set it up to where I don't have to hide those, but let me see here. Tulsa. Tulsa is a school that I'm not really too concerned with, and there's multiple reasons why. They struggled pretty greatly throughout the season, and I mean, they did play Ole Miss fairly well and even Cincinnati fairly well, but they definitely struggled, and I don't see there being really too much problems from them. That being said, of the first 3 games of the season, I do think that they will probably score more. Than the other 2 teams. But I don't think that it's a game that Oklahoma should really worry too much. That being said, they should respect every team and play every single game. Don't sleep on any team, because any team could potentially beat you on any given day. But I think that Tulsa is one of those teams that they have every opportunity to be great, but they just can't seem to get over that hump. They had a couple of decent seasons, I think, fairly recently, from what I remember, but I don't know. I don't want to disrespect Tulsa, but I think that Tulsa will be an easy game for Oklahoma. But Just because I think that it'll be easy doesn't mean they won't cause some issues. They will score more points than the other two opponents, but it'll still be a pretty solid game. 45-17 is what I predict Oklahoma will do against Tulsa. And that's another factor too that I forgot to mention. Like, just because it's in Tulsa, like, I know I've heard a lot of people say that it's kind of like a glorified home game for Oklahoma. So that's another factor, is like, I'm sure there'll be plenty of Sooner fans present in Tulsa. So the home field advantage aspect probably won't really affect the game a whole lot. So I think 45-17 is a pretty reasonable score for that game. And now we get into Big 12 play. And Cincinnati is a team that I respect greatly, especially in recent years. Whenever they did go to the playoffs, I was one of few people that seemed like, I mean, I'm sure there was plenty of other people that were all for them going to the playoffs, but it seemed like nobody wanted them to go into the playoffs, even though they were like the only team that in that regular season to be undefeated. Granted, they may not have had the greatest strength of schedule, but you cannot deny the idea that they were one of the only teams, or they actually, by the end of the season, they were the only team undefeated that year. And so it's like, how do you leave the only undefeated team out of the playoffs? That's just not really that fair, in my opinion. Wins should matter more than brand name. So, I mean, say what you will about that one, but I do have a huge amount of respect for Cincinnati. And honestly, that is a game that we definitely need to have circled on our calendars, that we need to be ready for. We need to be prepared for it. We don't need to overlook the first three games. I mean, we've got to still put on a good game on each and every single game that we play, but Cincinnati could very well be a team that we struggle against. I don't think it'll be one of the teams that we lose to this year, but I think that they could still give us some issues. So let's kind of look at how they did last year. The answer to your question is yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the. I guess I have to end the stream now. You answered my question. Oh, that's funny. All right, let's go to Cincinnati. Oh, let's get rid of those. And here's kind of another reason why I respect them. They had a pretty good record last year. 9-3 is a pretty good record for the regular season. And then you do have the loss against Louisville. That's unfortunate, since you're not near the same team. I mean, who knows? I mean, they played really well last year. I mean, look at that against Arkansas, a fairly respected SEC. I mean, they're not the biggest respected SEC team, but they are fairly respected, and they put on a game against them. I know it was the season opener, but still, like, they did pretty well. Then you have UCF, another Big 12 team. That was a close game between the two. So the people think that we can sleep on a lot of these newcomers to the Big 12. I think that they can pack a punch against us if we're not careful. So we need to really be on guard against them this year. I mean, look at Tulane. A team like Tulane was able to beat them. That's probably one of their worst losses of the season, with the exception of Louisville. But it was still a close game. So I think that Cincinnati is something that we need to be careful about and we need to be on guard against, because they could very well come out on top. And not to mention, like, they do have home field advantage too. Like that, I mean, that is a factor in some of these games, is like they're going to have home field advantage, and they seem to have a pretty solid fan base. So I think it'll be a pretty rowdy stadium, to say the least. But all that's to say, I think that Oklahoma still comes out on top. 38-27. So it'll be the closest game up to this point. Cincinnati will give Oklahoma some problems, but I think that late in the game there will be some things that happen that late in the game that will go in Oklahoma's favor. Maybe like a couple of turnovers or a couple of really key 3-and-outs that puts the game in Oklahoma's favor. I think it'll be a nail biter. I think it could very well be a nail biter up until the third or fourth quarter, and then those key plays could happen that will give Oklahoma the edge and kind of some breathing room. But I think it'll be a good game. I'm really looking forward to playing against Cincinnati. Nah, Tulane was solid last year. I mean, they were fairly solid. I won't lie, but in recent memory, or not recent memory, but in the history of college football, Tulane's not been like a team that is well respected. I don't think OU loses to any of the new schools. I don't either, and I'll definitely get to that later on, but I definitely don't think any of the new schools will beat Oklahoma, but I do think that they will give OU some problems. And there is one school that I like. If Oklahoma gets a third loss, it might be one of those schools, but I'll get to that later on. Now we have Iowa State. They didn't do really good last year. However, they still managed to beat us. So I can't really say much about that. But let's see. I'm clicking on the wrong stuff again. There we go. There we go. Iowa State was not that great last year. I mean, they had a lot of close games that they lost, but that's pretty bad when you have that many games decided by one score or less. One score or less. That's funny. When you have that many games decided by one score, you know, that's frustrating for one, but you can't let that happen. And historically, Iowa State hasn't been that great of a team, so I really don't have any kind of fears against Iowa State. And honestly, like, with it being a kind of potential revenge game for Oklahoma, I honestly think that they're gonna beat the snot out of them. I think that it's not even gonna be I don't even think it's gonna be a good game. I think that it's going to, let's see here. What did I put down as my prediction? $56-14. I think that this is a revenge game at its finest. This will be the most points that Oklahoma scores this season in one game. I feel like. Unless I put more. I think this is the highest score that I put for Oklahoma, if I remember right. 56-14. I think that they will be seeking a brutal revenge against last year. And I have to leave it at that, because like I think that it'll be, everything's just gonna is kind of lined up perfect for that type of narrative, I guess. It's a home game, and I think that they are going to be out for revenge to avenge that loss from last year. So all that to say, moving on to Texas, the fun one, the one that everybody is, pretty much everybody is saying that this is going to be one of OU's losses this year. And it very well could be. It very well could be. Oh, let's see. One second. You're right. Okay. Yeah, you're right. They did win. Oops. They did win. I got ahead of myself there. Oklahoma did beat them. I still think it's going to be a blowout. I think that Oklahoma will come out on top. So you're right. I do apologize. Thanks for that catch. I think I got ahead of myself there. That's embarrassing. But no, in terms of Texas, for one, I do think Texas is overrated this year. I will say that. I do think that they're a good team. I'm gonna have to put some soap in my mouth after saying that, but I do think that they are a team to respect this year. And say what you will about what happened last year. I mean, I hate to throw out excuses, but to be fair, we were not at our strength. We were kind of weakened at that point. Yes, it was a shutout, and yes, that should not have happened. But when you think about the nature of the sport, and like, if your key player, your quarterback goes out, and then like your backups can't do anything, that means the defense is out there non-stop throughout the entire game. Like there were constant 3 and outs throughout the game, and that is unacceptable. Because now the defense has to be on the field for like 90% of the game, and the defense can only do so much at that point. They're gonna eventually get worn out. So I just don't see that happening this year. I think that we have better depth in our QB position, so I think that our offense will stay on the field a lot longer. Texas is over. Yeah, I have to agree there. But I feel like we do have better depth now this year than we did last year, and so I think that we will definitely do much better than last year against Texas. That being said, well, first let's bring up the Texas outcome of last year. I keep forgetting to hide the those. I mean, Texas wasn't all that great either. Let's face it. Texas wasn't as... They weren't as bad as us, but they weren't good either. Like, they had a losing season as well. And I do find it funny that they lost to OSU, but then we beat OSU, but then Texas shut us out. It just makes no sense, but that's college football for you. It doesn't matter what team you are or who you are or what brand you are. Any team can beat you on a good day. So that shows you right there that that's evidence of that. But I mean, and then they go to their Alamo Bowl and they lose to Washington, which Washington's a respectful team, absolutely. But still, I don't see Texas being as good as what everybody's saying they are. But it's debatable on whether or not they're better than us. I'm not going to be the one that determines that. Let's see it on the field. But all that to say, I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a nail biter. 24-17, first loss on the schedule. But it'll be a great game. It's going to be one of those that I think might be determined by a fumble, interception, a pick six, a scoop and score. I think it's one of those games that will be decided off of the turnover battle. And it could be early in the game that happens, or it could be like the last play of the game where it's Oklahoma on top and then they get an interception or a scoop and score that puts them over. Maybe not Oklahoma in the lead, but it'd be like a tie ball game. But that's something that could very well happen. But I think that both teams are good enough to where either one could win that game. I don't have any problems with that prediction. Especially if we do see improvement on Oklahoma's side of the ball. If we have a much different, improved team than last year, I don't see why we can't have this happen. Or better yet, I don't see why we can't win the game. I hope we win the game. But you can't go off, or you can't have a previous season and then have everybody expect you to beat them the next year. So I have to have a realistic expectation going into Red River. As much as I would love to see Texas get destroyed by Oklahoma, I have to give the edge to Texas, at least for now. This prediction could change like after Cincinnati. Like it depends on where we are when we start playing conference ball. Not an excuse. A 13-year-old girl can throw better than Beavis. That's awesome. That is true. All right, now we have a bye week, a much needed one, especially after the loss. Get kind of rested up and ready for the next half of the season. But then we go into UCF, the next new Big 12 team. I like UCF. I think that they're a cool team. I like their mascot. Back in the day, back in the NCAA football years of video gaming, there was a game mode on one of the multiple following this particular year, but there was a year that they had a game mode, or they introduced the game mode rather, called Mascot Mashup, and they didn't have a mascot for Oklahoma, but they did have one for UCF. So when I would play that game mode, I would always pick UCF, and so I would have these Golden Knights lined up, and it was a fun game mode. I enjoyed that. So that's the special place in my heart for UCF. And of course the couple of years ago that they went like 2 or 3 seasons undefeated, but then were left out of the playoffs. Like, I still feel bad for them. That's messed up. But it is what it is. Now they are in a better conference, supposedly. And that will hopefully help them be a little bit more respected if they ever have seasons like that in the near future. So, all that to say, let's get into their 2022 outcome. And let's hide that. UCF was actually pretty decent last year. They had some notable losses, for sure. Ones that they probably should have been a lot better in. But for the most part, they did really well. They beat Cincinnati, which is a decent school. They did better against Louisville than Cincinnati did. But despite how good they looked in previous season, I still don't think that they're gonna really give OU much problems. At least not like this year. If in the future, if that's an ever scheduled non-conference game, they might could give us some problems in the future, because I have my eyes on UCF. I think that they very well could be a team that could compete for a Big 12 championship in the relatively near future. And I just realized that I forgot to take the predictions off. My bad. So that being said, I love UCF. I do. And that's why I give them 20 points in that game. I think that that's a very decent score, and very similar to Cincinnati in terms of scoring. Just by, you know, Cincinnati, I give the edge by 1 touchdown. But perhaps similar to Cincinnati, it could be a close game throughout the game, but then I think things maybe in the third quarter start to go Oklahoma's way, and they start to break away once they find a rhythm. Yeah, like, and I did preface that a little bit about Texas, about you can't really go off of Gabriel's injury to determine how good Texas is, but at the same time, like, they did shut us out, so there is that. But that's why I think this year will be a lot closer, because we will have the depth that we lacked last year. So if something does happen, I think Jackson Arnold will definitely take over and do an outstanding job. Yo, what's up, man? Long time no see. Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm kind of getting into the sports conversations here. So we're kind of going through some college football here. Anyways, I'm sidetracked, but that's okay. I enjoy talking with you guys. Yeah, 38-20. I think that's a very fair assessment of the newcomers of the Big 12. Oklahoma still shows a bit of dominance, but still shows that the new teams are ripe and ready to be powerhouses in the Big 12. So I definitely think that UCF and Cincinnati will be respectful wins. They've got to earn it first, or still. Like they've got to earn that win, but I think that it will ultimately be decided probably in the third quarter of each game. Third, and then maybe mid fourth quarter for Cincinnati. Once again, these are all gut feelings. Like none of this should be taken like seriously. Like this is just going based off of information from last year to now this year. So please, like, if you think that these values make no sense, for one, you have my permission to roast me in the comments, but two, just know that these shouldn't be taken seriously. They shut us out because we only ran the ball and they only had to guard against the run. Not too hard. Shut someone out that way. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. All right, Kansas. We've kind of neglected Kansas here. Let's get rid of those and pull up Kansas. So Kansas was an interesting team the last couple of years. They've definitely shown some growth. Very impressive season for them. It shows that they're kind of heading in the right direction. But until I see it happen consistently, it might have been a fluke. Who knows? I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, I really do. But until we see more, I want to see more of Kansas, and I hope to see that this year. But I think that given the history of the programs, I don't see Kansas really keeping up with OU that much. So let's just kind of rip the band-aid off with this one. I think it's going to be a blowout. Not as big of a blowout as Iowa State. I guess I just have a thing against Iowa State. Maybe that's why I went with that. 52-24. So I think Kansas does pretty well on offense, but I think our offense does really well. And who knows, maybe there's a couple of key players on our defense that does get injured by this point. And I hope that doesn't happen, but maybe that does happen. And so we struggle a little bit more on our defense. I mean, let's face it, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games into the season. It's a very competitive and aggressive sport. So people get dinged up, and so throughout the course of the season we might have some problems on our defense just because of injury. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope everybody stays healthy. So that might be a reason why Kansas gets 24 points. But that being said, I think it's gonna be a blowout. And that's another. It could be one of those games too where the game is decided in the first quarter, and then OU lets off the gas and they send in their second, third, and fourth stringers, and then it's through that Kansas is able to get points on the board. That's how it goes. Not basketball season, automatic win for there you go. All jokes aside, Kansas is gonna be one of the better teams in the Big 12 this year. I mean, it very well could be. It very well could be. But are you referring to the right Kansas? Kansas State or Kansas? No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, they could be on the up and up. The last season was actually really good for Kansas. And if they can continue with that trajectory, they could be really good this year. But I mean, I just don't want to go off of one season. I need more information from them. I want to see more from them this year. And we may get to Iowa State and there will be plenty of games of Kansas by that point. I would think maybe Texas. Once we get to Texas, there might be plenty of games that we see of Kansas that may change my opinion about them. And I hope so. I really do hope that they are heading in the right direction with their program. I do wish that we played Kansas State, not gonna lie, and who knows, maybe we will get that opportunity in the Big 12 championship game to play Kansas State. We gotta avenge some losses with them, and it stinks that we're gonna be leaving the conference without a guarantee game against them to at least avenge one of those losses. So that kind of is unfortunate, but I do wish that we would have had them on our schedule just so we could have an opportunity to stop them. But anyways, let's move on. And I just realized, man, I'm really bad about not showing what I'm talking about. So please bear with me here on this, because the way the OBS studio works, it's a little finicky. Sometimes I edit the window and it automatically updates the window. Other times I have to click the transition button. So if I do miss some graphics or miss some predictions there, that is probably why, because I'm paying attention to my preview window and not my actual window. It's a little finicky, and I'll hopefully streamline it a little bit more better later on. All right, we're going to OSU now. Bedlam. This is the game I hope I will get to go to. That's kind of my goal, is to go to this, because I'm wanting to go to Stillwater. The only other stadium that I've ever been to is Kansas, up in Lawrence, and I have been to the OU Texas game down in Dallas, but I've never been to Tulsa. I've never been to Stillwater or any other Big 12 team. And I think it'd be kind of neat to try to at least go to one more Big 12 game, Big 12 stadium before we leave. I should have been doing that all along, but of course I didn't really know we were going to be leaving anytime soon. But I think this will be an interesting game. Now let's take a look at their record. So they weren't great. They weren't good. They weren't great either. Now they did put on a show against TCU, and they beat Texas, who shut us out. But then they turn around and lose to us for some reason. It's kind of weird. It's weird how football works sometimes. They lost to Kansas, and they got shut out by Kansas State. Very notable losses there. And then, man, the Big 12, we stunk last year in our bowl games. We had so many losses, us, Oklahoma included on that. I'm hoping though to go to Bedlam this year, regardless of how good each team is, because I think that'd be cool to see the last Bedlam game in who knows how long. I still think that it should be a non-conference regular, but I guess Gundy and them didn't want to do that. And it may even be above Gundy's control too, but for some reason that they don't want to schedule Bedlam going forward. So I guess that means that Oklahoma will, like, even if we lose this, even if we lose against OSU, we technically, I guess, will win the series, since we will no longer be playing them. But all that to say, I think it'll be a pretty decent game. Probably one of the better Bedlam games in recent memory, just because, like, Bedlam has been a weird game where one year Oklahoma will blow them out, and then the next year OSU will blow them out. It's kind of weird. There's been very few Bedlam games that I've seen be close. I think this will be one of those years. I think it'll be a pretty close game. But I think ultimately OU comes out on top. So I feel pretty good about that. I think that Oklahoma will win the Bedlam series, regardless if they win the game or not, just because of the sheer number of wins total that you have going back to the history of the program. But I think it'll be a good game, though. I think it will be pretty solid. Now we got West Virginia. Now I know we did for sure lose against West Virginia last year. I do remember that. So I don't even remember what I put on the prediction. But let's go ahead and boot up the West Virginia outcome. There we go. West Virginia is not really that great of a team. They aren't. But they beat OSU last year. They beat us last year. They beat Baylor last year. Like, they beat a lot of the notable Big 12 teams last year. But then they had a lot of losses last year too, though. But West Virginia is kind of one of those weird programs. Very inconsistent, I think. They played Pittsburgh pretty well. They lost to Kansas. Probably the best Kansas team we've seen in a while. They lost Kansas. I just don't think that West Virginia is going to be able to beat us this year. Especially with it being in Norman. I think that home field advantage will definitely benefit Oklahoma. So I got to hide that. This is going to be a revenge game for sure. I think that West Virginia will definitely croak here in Norman. I don't think that they will be good this year. And I think Oklahoma, they're out for revenge. I think this is the game that I was trying to refer to last time. I don't know why I was thinking it was Iowa State. It was West Virginia. They are the team that we are going to definitely have circled because we need to get some revenge there. I think last year was the first year that they've ever beat Oklahoma in the history of the program. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I remember them being Oklahoma against West Virginia being undefeated up until last year. I think West Virginia broke that record last year. Once again, I could be wrong. BYU. Now, I said it earlier. There's really only one of the new teams that kind of has me a little concerned. Like, if Oklahoma is going to lose 3 games, I think this next one is going to be the game that they lose. I just have that feeling. For some reason, we don't play BYU very well in the history of the matchup, which isn't very many times, but BYU does concern me a little bit. So we definitely should be very conscious. Wow, that's hard to say. Of their talent. We need to be ready for that team. We could very well easily beat them and beat them solidly, but they could very well easily beat us too, I think. It's just kind of one of those games. We don't tend to play BYU very, very well. The few times that we have played them. So I think that we definitely need to be concerned about it, but I do think that Oklahoma does come out on top on this game. It's hard to say how much. That is why I have it a 1 touchdown win for Oklahoma. And kind of like the OU Texas game, it could be a game that's determined by a turnover of some sort. There could be that one turnover that changes the course of the game for either team. Either Oklahoma or BYU. I just have that feeling. And of all of the newcomers into the Big 12, I think that BYU is the one that concerns me the most. For some reason, I just have that feeling. It's just a gut feeling. No merit to it whatsoever, but for some reason, I just have that feeling that if we are a 3-loss team this year, BYU would be that team. So you might be wondering who my second loss team is. Excuse me. Well, let's take a look at TCU. I do know that they lost a lot of talent last year. But they were really good last year. They were a little too good. They were basically Oklahoma last year in terms of their record. I mean, they actually they did better than Oklahoma because they actually had an undefeated season. Yeah, they did lose to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game. But I mean, it went to overtime, so they very well could have won that game. And then they go to the semifinals of the playoff and they beat up on Michigan. I know that they've lost some talent, but it scares me that they had that good of a season. Granted, they did get killed by Georgia, but let's face it, probably anybody who was going to be killed by Georgia that year. They were just a phenomenal team. And yes, you heard that right. I am praising Georgia. They are a great team. Still hate the SEC though. Even with us joining SEC, I think SEC is just always been overrated and always given the benefit of the doubt. And other conferences are kind of left as not as respected. So let's get into the prediction here. To wrap up the 2023 season, I have the second loss for Oklahoma. I think TCU will come to play. Not as good as last year, but I think that it'll be a very, very close game. Decided by a field goal, basically. And once again, kind of like Texas and BYU, it could be one of those games that is determined by a major play. One major play could be the determining factor of who wins that game. But I think ultimately TCU comes out on top, so it really sucks because that means two Texas teams would be the two losses of our schedule. I hope we are able to avoid that, especially like if we do have one loss. I'm hoping that we will be able to make it to the Big 12 championship game, especially if Texas makes it there. If I would be okay to not make it to the Big 12 championship game as long as Texas doesn't make it. I hope that Texas doesn't make it if we don't make it. But if we make it, then I'm fine with Texas making it, because then I think that OU could avenge the loss. And how fitting would that be that the two teams leaving the conference are the two teams that make it to the Big 12 championship game? I think that'd be great. I think that'd definitely be one of those crazy stories that you would hear. And that would be the cool determining thing to say, all right, the winner of this game is the winner of the Big 12. And then mic drop and leave. But I look forward to hopefully us getting to that point. I really do. And if we don't, I hope Texas doesn't. I really hope that they don't make it to the Big 12 championship game unless we do. I really don't want them to win it for sure. I hope that if they do make it, I hope they lose. Because that would leave a sour taste in my mouth to be the dominant Big 12 team for most of the for most of the last 12 or so years that we've been in the Big 12. We have dominated the conference, and that would really suck if our rival is the one that finishes out the conference, the champion. So I like that's kind of my hope is that doesn't happen that way. I hope that if both of us make it, that we come out on top. But I don't know. It all will be determined in the next several weeks. I'm looking forward to it. But that concludes that whole segment of the rankings that or not the rankings, the predictions that I have for this season going forward. I think that we will see much improvement from the last season in Oklahoma. I think that we will go from that 7-loss team to a 2-loss team. I think that's a reasonable jump given the schedule that we do have. Now, that being said, I do want to here in a little bit want to kind of go over real quick certain games that will help boost the schedule a little bit, make it a little bit more respectful depending on how other games go. But I think that we will see a big improvement this year in our team. I think that we have a lot more depth in certain key positions that if something were to happen to a certain team, to a certain player, that the next man will be ready. The next man up will be ready and actually play well. And more specifically, the quarterback position, because that was just egregious. The backup situation last year. So I definitely have a lot more confidence this year in that regards, that we have better depth. Therefore, if worst case scenario we have injured players, I think that we will be okay and still be able to compete very well at a high level. And that's why I think we would go from a 7-loss team to a 2-loss team. That being said, I would love to see, like, best case scenario, we're undefeated and go to play for a national championship and win it, of course. But I do want to be a little realistic here. That, okay, of our schedule, who are the 2 teams that we would most likely lose to if we're going to lose? And then also the teams that I respect the most and think that we are most likely going to lose to if we have a 3rd loss. Definitely BYU. Excuse me. But all that to say, let's kind of move on to kind of the final segment of this stream before we say goodbye. Let's boot up. I texted my brother this next part, so I'm looking for that text because I want to get it right here. So I kind of looked at the opponents' schedules, OU's opponents' schedules this year. And there are certain key games that stood out to me from certain teams. And some of them, people will be like, kind of like making fun of me probably for even suggesting that the team, that OU's opponent will beat their opponent. But once again, I want to reiterate, I believe any team can beat any team under the right circumstances, and we might actually see that in some of these games. And if that is the case, then this mediocre schedule that people like to call it may not be as mediocre as what they think. It just depends on how the season goes, which that's honestly how it should be to begin with anyways. Like, a strength of schedule argument should never be determined preseason. A strength of schedule argument should only be determined at the end, at the very end, when all games have been played, because every year is different. So you cannot just sit there and say that we have a terrible schedule when we don't really know if we have a terrible schedule, because we haven't seen what these teams are capable of yet. So all that to say, the few games that I kind of have circled or kind of think could help bolster Oklahoma's schedule a little bit. West Virginia versus Penn State. That is a notable game. If West Virginia can somehow pull off the upset against Penn State, and if Oklahoma can beat West Virginia, that's a solid win. That's a solid win by association. Solid win by association. Because that big Penn State's a pretty solid Big Ten team, very well respected team. You got BYU versus Arkansas. You know, Arkansas is maybe not the greatest SEC school in the world, but they're still very well respected. And it's an SEC school. People love the SEC for some reason. So BYU, please beat Arkansas, so that way if we beat you, it'll make us look better. No pressure. Then you have Tulsa versus Washington. Washington's another one of those teams that, at least in the last couple of years, have been very well respected teams. So I don't see why that shouldn't be something that bolsters Oklahoma's schedule if Tulsa beats Washington. I know that's probably like 9 times out of 10 probably won't happen, but what about that 10th time? It could happen. And if Tulsa's able to beat Washington, that's another game that would help bolster Oklahoma in terms of their strength of schedule. And then, of course, the big one, Texas versus Alabama. We saw that it can be done. Texas can possibly beat Alabama. I mean, they got really close last year. Really close with their second string, mind you. So it could happen. And if Texas can somehow pull off the upset against Alabama, and then we at least compete well with Texas, if we have a better score against Texas than Alabama, what's to say we're not better than Alabama at that point? I know. I mean, even last year, it was proven that you can have a three-way win-loss record where you beat a team, they beat another team, and then that team that they beat you. I mean, we saw that with OU, Texas, and OSU last year. We had like this weird three-way win-loss record thing that happened. So it could happen against Alabama, but still, like, we don't play Alabama, at least not in the regular season. So the only information we would have to go off of is the Texas-Alabama game. And then, of course, how we do against Texas. Like, that's the common link. That's the common thread. The common denominator, if you will. So there are games that could bolster OU's schedule. Not to mention, what if some of these other teams, their only losses to Oklahoma? I could see BYU possibly, being one of those teams. OSU could be, this could be a pretty good year for them. TCU could, that's the cool thing about having more teams in the Big 12 is not everybody has to play everybody. So therefore, you can have multiple teams with one loss. You can have multiple teams with 2 losses. A lot more than what we've seen in the past where everybody has to play each other, because usually it's like You have one undefeated. You could technically have 2 undefeated Big 12 teams going into the Big 12 championship now. That's a big deal to me. Like, that makes Big 12 look better because that's more undefeated teams going into their conference game. That's cool. That's something that the Big 12 has been missing out on for a while now. So I think that could help bolster our schedule up because we might see better record Big 12 teams just simply because not everybody has to play each other. We have a bit of a buffer, so we're gonna possibly see a natural increase in records as far as the Big 12 is concerned. So, say what you will about Big 12. Say what you will about Oklahoma's schedule. At the end of the day, they've got to show up. They've got to play. There's still plenty of games out there that they very well could lose. There's plenty of games out there that they could go and dominate. But I don't know. I may be completely off on my predictions. I mean, that's the thing about predictions. I can't predict the future. I can only go based on what I know. And even that is very minimal. Because I haven't really followed along on the recruitment paths. I don't know what team is getting what. But that's another story or another topic that I won't get into too much. But with other than the idea that, you know, say what you will about recruiting classes and all that. But at the end of the day, those don't always matter. I mean, look at Texas in the last several years. Really great recruiting classes, but then they can't seem to put it all together. Look at us, even with Rattler. Like, he was like the quote-unquote best quarterback in the nation, and then we saw how he turned out. So that's kind of why I don't really put a whole lot of stock in recruiting classes and recruits and transfers, because at the end of the day, your team has to mesh well. At the end of the day, your team has to work together and be selfless. Put the team first. Put the team's needs first. Be willing to learn. If any of those recruits and if any of those transfers don't fully buy into the program, it doesn't matter how good they are. The team could easily fall flat, and we've seen that. I mean, we've experienced that as Oklahoma. We've had really great stretches of years where we've had like really great recruiting classes, but then for some reason we couldn't put it together. Same with Texas. So all that to say, I really hope you guys enjoyed this little spiel. I do apologize for the technical problems that I had with trying to navigate my different slides here. I'm using OBS Studio, and it's a little finicky at times. So I hope it wasn't too jarring for you guys, but I hope you guys enjoy this little talk. And I don't know, I might take some of the clips from this and post like little snippets to kind of break it up a little bit. So don't be surprised if you guys come across videos with the same information. But I there might be some certain things that I say or have talked about that I might want to readdress or something through a video. But once again, I do appreciate you guys making it this far. You guys are awesome. And please, please, please feel free to utilize the live chats when I live stream. Utilize the comment section. If there's anything that I get wrong, or if there's anything, if there's something, any kind of feedback that you guys want to give about like my predictions or how I feel about a team or not, please, please, please feel free to throw your input into the comment section, and I'll try to respond to it as soon as I possibly can. And we'll have a good conversation. I mean, that's at the end of the day, when it comes to preseason talk, that's all what this is all about, is discussion, conversation. And because at the end of the day, it truly doesn't matter, but it's something worth talking about. It's fun to talk about. People enjoy it. People love hearing it. So please, let's have a discussion in the comments, and I'll get back to those comments periodically. But I just, yeah, this was fun. This was a lot of work to put together, and I want to do more stuff like this going forward. We're really wanting to do more college football related type stuff. So that being said, stay tuned for, I think, tomorrow. I don't know what time I will get to it, but I do want to do kind of a end of the day stream. So it might be kind of late when I do it, because it'll be sometime after the last game of week 0. I have a spreadsheet that I will input certain data points, and I will rank teams this season. All 133 teams, I think is how many there are. However many teams that I have on there. I think it's 133. I will rank all of them based off of certain criteria, and I will do that live. I plan on doing that live. It may be a little late in the day. It may be like 7 or 8, whatever the last game is of tomorrow. It'll be right after that. So it might be fairly late when I get to it, but I want to do that. I think it'd be cool. Hey, Stranger Beast. I'm kind of wrapping things up here, but you're more than welcome to hop in and watch some of the stream a little bit here. But we're just kind of going over college football, American college football. So anyways, all that to say, yeah, I'm gonna do a live show of me kind of going through and kind of ranking the teams that play yesterday. So it probably won't be that long because not very many teams are playing, but it'll be just something that I want to kind of do throughout the season and kind of update my rankings, hopefully every single week, utilizing the criteria that I have established. And we'll kind of see where the teams end up by the end of the season. And I will rank, I will have my own national champion, if you will, by the end of the season. Post conference game. It'll be pre playoff game, but it'll be post conference game. So that will be whenever I kind of determine my national champion of the entire season, and it'll be completely unbiased data. It'll be data that is determined by a point system. So there will be zero bias. There will be no brand names that have an advantage over the other. It does take strength of schedule into consideration, but in a different way. It's still based off of statistical data to determine it, the strength of schedule. But that is another spreadsheet that I will have to do at the end of the season when all the games have been played. So I will do kind of a live one throughout the season, and then once I have that list of the first spreadsheet, then I will take the information from that first spreadsheet and apply it to the second spreadsheet, and on the second spreadsheet we'll have information like for like whether or not you won your conference championship game, and then as well as the teams that you played, where did they fall in the rankings at the end of the season, and kind of readjust the teams based off of the points that you are awarded for beating the teams that are at a specific ranks. I'll explain all of that later. And to answer your question real quick, Stranger Beast, with Lats, I still want to get back into Star Citizen. I really do. I'm definitely at a big burnout phase of that right now. But I'm glad you asked about it, because I still have Star Citizen on my heart. I want to play it more, but I'm kind of waiting until it gets to a more complete product. I've played it so much that like a lot of the bugs and stuff like that have kind of been getting in the way. So I've kind of put that whole series on hiatus for a time. Maybe whenever 4.0 comes out, I will probably start it back up again, just because it will be at a more complete state of its developments, and so hopefully less bugs and also server meshing and all that will be implemented. But that is a different topic for another day, of course. But right now we are definitely covering college football, but I do appreciate the question. So, anywho, all that to say, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section, not the live chat, since we're about to wrap things up. If you want to leave a comment in the comment section, and I will have a text conversation with you guys. And then maybe later down the road, I might create a Discord server for the opportunity to allow people to come onto the show, if the show even gets to a point where, you know, we have a solid following. Then we can get some people on the show to kind of discuss with me, and it's not just you guys hearing my voice talk for an hour and a half or so. But anyways, I'm kind of rambling. I tend to do that in my streams when I'm trying to wrap things up. So if I don't stop it now, then I probably will never stop. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch me rant about college football. I'm getting excited. We're so close. We're, at least for as far as Oklahoma is concerned, we are 1 week away and 1 day, and kickoff will begin, and it's going to be a blast. So look forward to it. I hope you guys, whatever team you guys root for, I hope your team does well, and I hope you are doing well as well. You all take care, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.